So in this final section, we're going to be looking at troubleshooting IPv4 routing. And as I said at the beginning of the chapter, we've already done some troubleshooting of routing protocols. And so that's not really going to be the focus here. Routing protocols is one area, of course, where issues could arise. Routers don't have the right routes. They're not configured with the right areas. They don't have, matching configuration settings, so they fail to become neighbors. And that's all well and good. And so we defined a process that, well, that's not good, but those could be problems. We defined a process for looking at what routes should be in the routing table, and then if they're missing, to decide where those routes would come from and whatnot. But there are other potential problems. In fact, there are a lot of different problems that can occur on today's networks, and these problems can happen at multiple levels. So we want to be able to troubleshoot all of these potential issues. It's extremely important to be able to isolate the affected area. That's going to help you save time and energy during the troubleshooting process. And as I think I might have alluded to before when we were talking about routing, having some sort of troubleshooting methodology is going to definitely assist in that process. And we call these troubleshooting models. And it doesn't necessarily matter which troubleshooting model you use, but you need to have a troubleshooting model. You need to have a structured approach to resolving problems, or else we're just kind of flying all over the place. And there's no set process, and so it becomes easy to overlook things. It becomes easy to try to implement fixes and they don't work, and then I forget to remove the quote-unquote fix. It becomes easier to implement a fix that actually causes other problems because I haven't really researched it very well. So we need to follow that approach. And I'm not giving you a particular model to follow. I'm just kind of going through, the concept, the idea. Every one of the models, if you just take a look at a few different troubleshooting models, every one of them starts out the same way. And that is clearly identifying what the problem is. And we typically do that either through gathering information off of systems or through asking the end user, somewhat open-ended questions to try to get as much information about the issue as possible. Now, with networking, it is critical that we isolate the affected area, okay? Because that's going to help focus my troubleshooting efforts where they need to go. So we ask questions like which systems are affected. And again, we're not necessarily asking this to a person, although you might be. You're asking this question. You're gathering information to answer this question. Which systems are affected? Is it a single system that's affected? Or is it multiple systems? If it's a single system, then we would probably look at that particular machine's configuration, the port on the switch that particular machine connects to. If it's more than one system, then we need to ask a further question. How many and where are they? Are these systems that are all affected all in the same subnet? Are they all members of the same VLAN? Are they connected to the same switch? In other words, is there some other factor that would just still help me to isolate as opposed to just saying everybody's got a problem? Or is it in fact that everybody has an issue? As you answer those questions, you start to focus, right? If the answer to the first question, it only affects one system, your focus is on that system. If the answer to the second question is, yeah, it's actually only affecting the machines in this particular VLAN, then your focus is on that VLAN or on the switch that's hosting that VLAN. If it's on a physical subnet, your focus might be on the router. If the only level of access that is being prohibited is access to a particular machine, then you focus maybe on that machine or the path to that machine. But hopefully you can see how this is isolated. This is focusing my troubleshooting efforts. Which programs and protocols are in use? That's another good question. Because we frequently are going to get told that somebody's having a connectivity problem. And I can't connect to the internet. So we get an end user that says I can't connect to the internet. And then through this initial analysis of the problem, we find that the system actually can connect to the internet. It just can't connect to the one website that they were going to, And so lot of times from an end user perspective, that means the internet is broken. Well, there's, in that case, the focus is actually on the site that they're trying to go to or on the particular server that they're trying to go to. So it's very critical to isolate that area. Another key question is, what's the location of the systems that can't be reached? So you got a local machine that's having a problem. It's the only machine. Well, the next question is, what are you trying to do? Trying to communicate with other devices on the local subnet or VLAN? Are you trying to communicate with another subnet? Are you trying to communicate with the internet? Is it a particular site? All sites? We got to try to focus on what can be reached. So I just can't say it enough. The isolation of the problem in networking will save you a ton of time. Because it stops us from checking things that simply don't need to be checked. If you've got 20 computers connected to a switch, all members of the same VLAN, and you have one machine that's having a problem, you don't need to check the switch configuration settings. You don't need to, you don't need to check that central device. You might need to check the port that the individual device is connected to, but most likely that's a configuration problem. Same thing, if you've got a user who says they can't connect, but they're actually connecting to all kinds of other devices, they can connect to the router, it's just this one program, this web browser that can't connect. Well, maybe it's the browser or it's the web server they're connected to. Maybe it's a line of business application that's connecting to a database server over here, and that's all that's affected. So you got to answer these questions to assist you in those troubleshooting efforts, all right? So, that's enough of that, but it is very important to start that way. You don't want to just start jumping into, okay, well, this is the problem, let's check this, and this. That's all useful, but you really need to have a structured approach. So I will say a couple more things. I know I said that was it. I'll say a couple more things, and that's just, once you've isolated the problem, this is actually what the problem is, then we start hitting every potential issue or every potential component within that isolated area and checking and validating configuration. Now you might identify, probable causes, based on your experience, based on the symptoms, what you think the probable cause is, and start there. Once you've identified the problem, then you need to identify a resolution. This is going to take some research possibly. Maybe that's just asking a coworker. Maybe that is looking at documentation of problems that have occurred recently. Maybe it's using the internet. There's nothing wrong with using the internet to answer questions, with the exception of when you're taking an exam. They don't let you do that. But in real life, we're able to consult the internet, consult knowledge bases from a particular vendor, consult forums where other users may have experienced the same problem, and that can be very helpful. So if you find a solution to the problem, we want to research it a little bit, make sure it's a good solution. We want to implement it, and then we immediately want to see if that actually resolves the issue. If it doesn't resolve the issue, roll back the change and start over again. Start over with another possible cause. If it resolves the issue, we want to document, we want to communicate that back to the user, and then the issue is resolved, okay? So having gone through those things, let's now turn to some actual problems and just talk about the possible issues related to those problems. So as I said, there are a number of different issues that can cause connectivity problems. They could be problems between the host and the default router. The host could have incorrect configuration settings. So I just kind of want to talk through these and then just, state, okay, if this is the case, what would the symptoms be, so that hopefully when I see the symptoms, I can recognize the possible root cause. So the first one here, IP address in the wrong subnet. Okay, now what would the symptoms of this issue be? If somebody's got an IP address in the wrong subnet, who would they be able to communicate with? And the answer is no one. If I'm physically on a subnet and my IP address doesn't match the rest of the people on the subnet, then I'm not going to be able to communicate with anybody. Same thing in a VLAN, which officially is a software configured subnet. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to communicate with anyone. So as we're analyzing the symptoms, we should be dealing with a host machine that is unable to communicate inside the subnet, outside the subnet, to the internet, doesn't matter. They're unable to communicate. But they should be the only ones that are experiencing this problem, okay? If they're the only ones that are experiencing this problem, then we would go directly to the configuration settings on that host. And we would verify them, validate them. Now, if we find that there's an IP address in the wrong subnet, then the next question is, how did you get your IP address? If nobody else is having the problem, then it's unlikely, I would think, that you got it via DHCP. Because if DHCP is giving out wrong addresses, which usually means you have an incorrectly configured relay agent, then you would assume, and you would be right, that multiple people would eventually have this issue. Now, it's possible that this is the first host that had the issue, but I would still check those settings. Subnet mask configured incorrectly. That's really the same symptoms. One machine is most likely affected and can't communicate with anybody because the subnet mask is wrong. So that machine thinks it's on a different network than everybody else, even though the IP addresses might match. Shouldn't be able to communicate with anybody, including the default router. A missing or incorrect default gateway. Well, missing default gateway, the symptom would be that device can communicate within the subnet, but is not able to communicate outside of the subnet or VLAN. So that's just a real quick giveaway that there's a problem with the default gateway. It's either not there or it's configured incorrectly. Sometimes when it's configured incorrectly, it's just because we're using these custom subnet masks, and the custom subnet masks don't stop on the individual or on the decimal points. So we may have to turn to some binary math to figure out, okay, what's the actual network ID of this? What should the gateway be configured as? So on and so forth. But that also is probably an individual problem. If multiple people are experiencing this problem, then either somebody manually misconfigured them, or we, again, have an issue with what the type of information that DHCP is giving out. Duplicate addresses. Duplicate addresses is clearly going to cause a problem with each device that has a duplicate address. They're going to be unable to communicate. Usually duplicate addresses are displayed as 0.0.0.0 on those devices. Now that could be a DHCP issue. If it is related to DHCP, if it's not just the clients were manually configured using the wrong address, then it means often that there's more than one DHCP server serving a subnet, and they're not configured correctly to work with one another. DNS related issues. DNS is a practical requirement on virtually every network that we have. Windows networks, DNS is a requirement. But in TCP/IP, DNS is used to resolve names to IP addresses. And we use DNS all the time. We very rarely communicate via IP address. We connect to a name. Names for web servers, names for email servers, names for file servers, domain controllers. Within the network, we're always using names. Well, that means that my client has to be configured with the IP address of a DNS server. I have to be able to query that DNS server, and that DNS server has to be able to resolve that name to an address before I can communicate. So clearly a problem could be an incorrectly configured server on the client. Here again, let's back up and say, who's being affected? Is just this one machine being affected? Well, if that's the case, then we would want to check the preferred DNS server for that machine. Is it querying the right system? Or has somebody manually configured like an internet DNS server? I've seen that happen before, and that causes problems for internal name resolution. If it is multiple multiple clients that are facing this issue, then it could be related to DHCP giving out the wrong DNS server. Or the problem could be on the server itself. Server could be down. The server could not have a host record for the host that's being requested for whatever reason. So we would want to check those things. Bad cache entries, those can cause an issue. Each client has what's called a client resolver cache. The client resolver cache caches recently resolve names and the IP addresses that they were mapped to. The problem the problem can be twofold. Number one, the machine using that name could change IP addresses, but I still have a cached entry. So I continue to use the cached entry, but it's incorrect. Problem number two is that cache entry could be negative. So I queried DNS and said, give me the name or give me the IP address for server 1, and DNS says there is no server 1. And so I cached the fact that that particular host name is not found. and it's sitting in my cache. When I go try to query it again, it just immediately bounces back and says that name's not found. So we can flush the cache. We can clear it out. Incorrect host name being used, that's just mistyping usually. Changed host names for other devices on the network, which is what I just said about bad cache entries. We've just got inaccurate information. Now, generally speaking, those kinds of things, the DNS-related problems, are often isolated to a single host, but you definitely want to answer that question before you move forward because you can save yourself a little time. Now, there are certainly problems that aren't related to the host configuration. They would be related to router configuration. DHCP issues, for instance. Maybe a client doesn't have an IP address because the DHCP server is completely out of addresses. In that case, you'd want to evaluate those scopes based on the number of addresses, or the number of clients, I should say, that you have on the network, and make sure you have an adequate number of addresses. DHCP relay problems. We can configure routers with a helper address. That's basically you're telling the router to intercept DHCP related traffic and send it over to this DHCP server. If that's not functioning, then we would want to check that address, make sure it's communicating with the right server. That's also a problem that could result in clients getting IP addresses from the wrong subnet if that stuff's configured incorrectly. Incorrect options configured on the DHCP server, your default gateway, your DNS server, voice over IP options, the boot images for imaging client operating systems, all of that can be obtained via DHCP options. And so if one of those things is missing or inaccurate on a machine that is a DHCP client, then we would typically go check DHCP. Some problems that can cause the router LAN interface to fail. Now the isolation of this would be it's affecting everybody. Everybody is probably able to communicate locally because it's just using layer 2 logic, but they can't communicate off of that network. Well, then the focus goes immediately on the router. And so if the LAN interface is down, we could have a couple potential problems that would result in that. Speed mismatch on the router and the switch. So the switch is sending at a gigs per second and the router's expecting 100. The auto negotiate got turned off on either of them. The status will be down on the interface. If that's the case, how do we check that? Well, we have to show the configuration options on those interfaces. Shut down at the router. It would say admin down and down. A switch port being shut down would say down and down. These are administrative shutdowns. Error disabled switch, if I got that sort of message, then that means the switch is using port security and the port would be in a down state. That just usually means that the client has not been able to comply with those security settings, okay? So, as we said, there's all kinds of routing protocol issues, but there's all kinds of other configuration issues as well, and we need to be prepared to try to resolve these issues.